Yes, John Phelps here today, 24/7 World Radio Podcast with our guest on this Friday, Brother George Widger. It is now September the 13th, 2024, as we come to you live and direct in Newmanstown, Pennsylvania at about 7 o'clock at night Eastern Standard Time. So I want to welcome Brother George, and he has some specific topics he wants to cover, and hopefully I'll be able to add a few notes of detail possibly. So Brother George, welcome to the broadcast.
Well, thank you. As always, it's a pleasure to be on with you, brother.
A pleasure to have you. And the topics we will cover today look very interesting. So take her away.
Well, okay. My scripture verse is Joshua 24, verse 15. Joshua 24, verse 1-5. But it says, And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites, in which land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Okay, so I realized we did a stream a couple weeks ago, but because of technical issues, you had to pull it down. Hopefully this should be better. So I shared the scripture verse the last time we were on, and I realized God is sovereign in salvation, and I don't want to be too controversial or too contentious, because I realize there's different schools of theology, and I don't want to broach that whole debate. However, even though that is 100% correct, that does not absolve us of individual responsibility and individual behavior. You're talking about at least two disparate points. One about salvation, being saved, soteriology, that's the fancy word. The other one is responsibilities for individual actions, what we do in our day-to-day life. And so, yes, the Bible does teach.
Amen.
Okay, so I just thought I would address that. So, a number of things have taken place since we were last together, which usually happens. I guess, was it on Tuesday, there was a presidential debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. So did you catch it?
I did watch that. And it was just a wonderful debate. They brought out points and then they refuted each other's points. It was just a wonderful debate where they were obeying the rules of debate. And of course, the moderators were doing the same thing. It was despicable. Terrible.
Oh.
And Kamala Harris was grandstanding most of the time. Trump did say a few good things, but it was no debate.
Oh, okay. So I noticed that you started out, I take it you're being somewhat sarcastic.
Somewhat.
Okay, so what did you find so upsetting about what happened the other night?
She was constantly grandstanding. What we need is America for this. And the American people don't want that, but she never said, and she did that 3 or 4 separate times. Meanwhile, she's waving her hands everywhere. That's not a debate. A debate is you ask a question and you're asking for the facts to back up your answer, and then the other person has a chance to refute it with what he has in his facts. But it's not an issue of personality. Not at all. That's not a debate. And furthermore, it was ad hominem attack. She attacked this person several times. And I have a principle that when I'm in a debate, the first ad hominem attack on me, I win the debate and it's over. We don't do that. That's unprofessional. That's not proper debate. You have to address the point, the question, with the facts that you believe to be true, and then give your sources. That was no debate at all. And Trump, he got a little, the way he is. I don't care what she is. I don't care what she is, what her race she is. That's not a debate. These are ad hominem attacks. Ad hominem, and just give me the facts. I'm a big boy, and I can decide on my own who I'm going to be for, if I would be for either of them, because they're both run by the Jesuits, and based upon the different factual positions they put forward. whether they be facts or inferences. But just give me a debate, a real debate, like Nixon and Kennedy. That was a real debate back in 1960. It's not a debate. It's a matter of personality, ad hominem attacks, grandstanding, and it was disgusting.
Well,
share with us the relationship between that mulatta moderator. She's not black, she's a mulatta, but the mulattas are always in favor of the black race. Tell us about that mulatta and Kamala Harris, what their relationship's been in the past.
So I take it you're referring to Lindsay Davis?
That's right. The mulatta, the female mulatta, half black, half white, whatever she is, who's always going to be pro-black, as all mulattas are. And she obviously hated Trump. And so, do you think a moderator should hate either one that's debating? Do you think that's appropriate? Shouldn't you try to find a moderator that is trying to be somewhat objective in the questions that are being asked and without any hatred or reviling for the one you're questioning? They haven't done that for years. I haven't seen one debate where they've had hosts from ABC or NBC that didn't hate Trump. So that was no debate, and I just would like you to bring out the relationship between Miss Davis and Harris in the past.
Okay, so Lizzie Davis got her undergrad degree from, I believe, University of Virginia, to go. She is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha, which is a historically black female sorority.
Of course. Now the mulatta is going to be a black. She's not going to join the white, is she? Even though she's at least half white, she looked real white to me. We're going to be always pro-black, and let the listener remember this. All mulattoes, all half whites, half blacks are always pro-black and anti-white. Go ahead, George.
Okay, so well, I actually made references a few months ago when Joe Biden and Donald Trump had their debate back in June, and I said, boy, I mean, even back in 1960s, between Richard Nixon, the debate between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy, they feigned to be civil. They had a sense of decorum and
yes, as any civilized people ought to be. Savages don't act like that. Savages have ad hominem attack, and you did this and you did that, and what about Biden if you got out of bed today? I mean, that's unnecessary. Trump said that, but who cares? The issue are the facts we're debating based upon who the people are going to vote for.
Okay, so I know this may sound pedantic, but do you mind if I respond to your response?
Oh, please do, George. Just please do. This is
okay. So something I've said before, way back when I was in high school, I was a member of the National Forensic League, the NFL. No, the other one. And no, I didn't do steroids or anything like that. So the NFL is a high school speech and debate society, and I was part of I took speech class and I was part of the speech club, and I went to a number of events, like the student congress, and I had to do a number of these competitions. So we were given certain topics to cover, like 5, and we had to be able to argue both sides. So this was in the ACN regime back in the pre-internet. So you had to go look up things on microfiche. So you had to go look up a magazine and newspaper articles on certain topics, like whether the United States should continue funding the Contras in Nicaragua. So just to let you know, when I went to high school. And
was that, George, in the 1956? Is that when it was?
Thereabouts. But
yeah, so, what was it, in the 80s, George, or what?
Well, the 1980s. So you're talking close to 40 years ago. So we had to be able to argue both sides. And our coach said, by the way, in debate, your number one rule is to attack your opponent's argument. Never attack your opponent, regardless of what you may think of him. It's not personal.
Right.
Also, the moderators have two jobs.
Lawyers are taught the same thing, George. The lawyers are taught in law school, you don't take anything personally. You address the subject matter or the claim, and you do not attack the individual making the claim. Now, I guess when you become a judge, you can do that because they do it all the time. But that's what they're taught in law school, and properly so. You don't attack your opponent. You attack his claim or what he's saying or his proceeding or whatever. But it never goes emotional, and you always stay objective. Now, that's a true professional.
Okay. So Moderators for debates have two jobs. One, keep track of time. Oh, I'm sorry, you have 10 seconds left. You need to stop speaking. Second is to ask the questions. That is it. They're not to provide commentary. They're not to fact check people. It doesn't matter if everything Donald Trump said was false. That is immaterial because that's not the moderator's job.
That's correct. That's exactly right.
So it was highly.
That's the audience's job. That's the listener's job. Your big boys and girls go home and they check where he got that quotation or what he said, and then they can decide whether or not he lied or whether or not he told the truth. That's what the audience is supposed to do, not the moderator.
Okay, so so they did this at least 3 times throughout, maybe 4 or 5 times. Once Donald Trump was talking about the situation, I believe in Springfield, Ohio. He said there are thousands of Haitian invaders there.
Who should have said there are thousands of Haitian savage blacks. I just got an email on that. I know a guy that has a friend who lives right there. And he says, my wife has a friend in England who's surrounded by illegal Negro Somalians within the village she resides in. She cannot leave her past flat after 6 p.m. for fear of being mugged or raped. They burn their rubbish in 55-gallon drums outside. They urinate and defecate on the streets and sidewalks. So those are the savage black Somalians in England. And it's the same way with the Haitians in Ohio. That's the black culture. That's what they produce. That's why every black nation is a trash heap. They don't build anything unless white men come in and build an infrastructure for them. That's the way it is. I've seen that. I'm 70 years old. I've seen it firsthand for the last 50 years. Go ahead, brother.
Okay, so I guess the Roman Catholic David Muir, basically fact checked it. Said, I'm sorry, Mr. President, that's incorrect. That's not going on in Ohio. That's not going on anywhere in the United States.
Yeah, he was not to act as a censor. He was merely to present questions. The candidates would answer, and then he would move on. You've addressed the question. Thank you. That's right, because this is the Inquisition. This is a censorship. And they both were doing it. Both questioners, both moderators, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm. And so another thing that struck me is odd. Now, people have brought this up, talking about Kamala Harris's earrings. Was she wearing earrings, or was she wearing some sort of listening device, like a microphone?
I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me because she's really not that erudite in coming out with a retort that's based on factual evidence she can prove. So she has to be coached. And of course, that should be illegal in debate. It is illegal in debate. You can't do that.
Well, well, of course, what does that ever stop them from doing anything illegal?
Well, the reason why they do it, George, is there's no punishment. You can say we're not going to allow this, but if there's no punishment, big deal. They should say we're not going to allow this, and if we find you listening to microphones in your ears, this debate is over and the other opponent wins, and we're going home and have dinner. They have to be punished when they when they commit a foul of some sort. We don't have any punishment for crime. We don't have any punishment for fouls. We don't have any punishment for being out of bounds. It's a completely lawless society with no punishment. And that's going to be remedied real soon when the new right comes to power. But go ahead.
Okay, so that reminds me, I forgot when this happened, but this is sometime when Trump was in office and Nancy Pelosi was speaker, and she, I guess, got a copy of his State of the Union address, and she, so the whole thing was staged. She looked at it and she ripped it in half. Well, first, it had to be perforated because, given her age.
For her feeble little hands to rip that paper. Yeah, you're right, George.
Well, I actually, somebody told me she actually committed a federal felony by destroying a document.
Right. But who's going to enforce the law? The Jesuits and their U.S. attorneys at the Justice Department? Are you kidding? There's no law enforcement. There's no punishment of crime unless we're going to target somebody, like we'll target Trump and put out all these felonies and try him for that. Unless they're going to just use the legal world to persecute somebody.
Okay, so if I can just mention something on a more trivial nature, of course, would you expect anything else from me?
No, I wouldn't.
We've talked at great lengths about Nancy Pelosi, who is still in the Congress and has been Speaker of the House on at least 2 different occasions. And her husband, Paul, he's in his 83, 84. So back in, I guess, 1957, 1958, he was driving. So he just got his license and is driving with his older brother, David. And this is just south of San Francisco, I believe, San Mateo County. And Paul was drunk. I mean, he was way beyond the legal limits. And he had a collision, and his brother Dave ended up getting killed in the crash. And nothing happened to Paul. He didn't lose his license. He didn't go to jail. He literally had a get out of jail free card. And
he's a Roman Catholic knight. He's one of the big boys that run this place, run this empire, and so let him go. All these guys that run the place, all these guys that run the Pope's Holy Roman 14th Amendment, Socialist Communist American Empire are all knights and high Freemasons, and if you're high enough, you are outside of the law.
Oh, okay. So however, when this happened back in the late 50s, so Paul was a teenager. He was 16, 17 years old, and his brother David was a little bit older, but absolutely nothing happened to Paul. He did get arrested, but he was released. He was never charged. I mean, theoretically, he could have spent years behind bars.
Voluntary manslaughter. That's up to 10 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Accidental death. I mean, absolutely going up for 10 years. I mean, the same thing happened to Teddy Kennedy. He killed Mary Jo Kopechne, shot her in the back of the head, but nothing happens to him. All these guys, these senators, are untouchable because they are nothing more than Roman senators. And the Roman senators were not touchable because they were functioning under the Caesar, and the Caesar's the commander-in-chief. We have Roman government with the Roman military government, and the men at the top are untouchable. And I would say it's the Pope's white power structure that's untouchable.
Okay, so they, one of the, I was reading something recently, and there's, David Pelosi's obituary is in the paper. It's like 1957, 1958, thereabouts. And it turns out that Paul was a student at St. Ignatius High School at the time. And
what's that, George? What is St. Ignatius High School?
It's a Jesuit.
So the Jesuits were grooming one of their future soldiers in their school. And of course, now he's going to be untouchable because he's going to serve the Jesuit general in furthering the Council of Trent and destroying white Protestant Western civilization and all of its liberties and constitutions and historic common law. Go ahead, George.
Okay, so Paul, I guess, graduated from St. Ignatius High School without a hitch. He didn't go to juvenile hall or anything like that. And so he ended up going to Georgetown University, where he got his undergrad degree. And as I said, for decades, Paul Sr. Was on the board of trustees at Georgetown University, as would Paul Jr. Paulie still is on the board of trustees for Georgetown.
Goody. Well, see, obviously they are servants, they're slaves of the Jesuit order, and they have all the money, sex, and power they want. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life, all the money, sex, and power. And they're untouchable. As long as they keep running the Pope's 14th Amendment American Empire, the Holy Roman 14th Amendment American Empire, as long as they keep doing that, they're untouchable.
Oh, okay, so do you mind if I mention something? Since we're talking about trivia, did you ever see the 1963 film The Cardinal?
I believe I did. That was Rolf Henhoff's work that he wrote in 1963. And it was about the Pope being involved in the Eurasian Jewish Holocaust. Is that the movie you're talking about?
Well, it could be a different film. It was like, for the most part, it didn't have any big names, with the exception of John Huston, who was one of the directors for Why We Fight. Also, you had
Why We
Burgess.
Fight? One of the directors? Yeah. Well, of course, Not a Malta. Frank Capra put that out.
Well, it was John Huston was in the film. He played a Catholic archbishop.
Oh, and one of the good guys. One of the Catholic archbishops. You got to be holy, and one of the good guys. More propaganda.
Okay. So I looked it up, and the movie, as I said, came out in 1963. I'd never heard of it until somebody sent it to me. And it's notable for a number of reasons. It's a somewhat fictionalized version of the life of Francis Joseph Cardinal Spellman.
Oh.
And because this character, Father Steve, as he's known, is from Boston, Massachusetts. And it starts out.
Just like Frank. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah. So starts out that he comes back to he spends several years in Europe studying things, and so he gets off the boat. As I said, this is the movie came out in 1963, but it takes place between the years 1917 and 1938. So to give you some context, and he wants to just be a humble parish priest, but he also has aspirations of becoming a cardinal and getting involved with the diplomatic corps, the Vatican, hence the name of the movie. Now, as I said, it's a fictionalized version of Spellman. So when he gets back home to Boston, Massachusetts, he goes to his local church, St. Mary's or St. Peter's, typical Catholic church, and he's talking to his local Monsignor. And there's this fellow there named a fictional character named Cornelius Deegan. And he said, "Oh, hey, how you doing? So how you doing, Father Steve? Oh, I'm doing great, Mr. Deegan. And so, by the way, you want to come to my dinner this evening? Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Deegan. Oh, by the way, did you know the Pope just named me a Knight of Malta? Really? Congratulations. So how'd you manage that?" And he said, "Well, basically, if you give the church enough money, they'll make you a knight."
Is that what the movie said?
Well, yes.
So they said that in the movie. Well, they're right. That's absolutely
okay.
Right.
So, as I said, I couldn't figure out who this real life Deegan was. As I said, he's fictitious, but so they made him a knight. So he's probably a Kennedy or somebody like that. But they had to change the name. Now, right. The film is interesting for a number of reasons. So one of the sources of conflict is when Father Steve goes back home to visit his parents, his sister is engaged to be married to a young dentist, a young Jewish dentist.
Oh.
And that's a major source of irritation for them. And so his younger sister, so how's your Jew boyfriend doing today? So if you marry him, your children are going to be Jews.
Well, that's not correct. The seed passes through the father, not the mother.
According to
papacy and according to apostate Judaism, the seed passes through the mother, and that is not correct. It passes through the father. Go ahead, George.
Her Mona is the sister of Father Steve, who later becomes a cardinal. So her boyfriend, I forgot his name. He's a Jewish dentist. So the younger sister says, "Well, that if you end up marrying him, your children will be Jewish."
Yeah, that's right. Pardon me. The seed goes through the man, so his children would be Jewish. That's correct. Racially Jewish.
Okay, so Steve is charged with the task of trying to get him to convert to Catholicism. And so he's in classes with him and said, "Wait a second, I can't buy this stuff. The perpetual virginity of Mary. The earth was created in 6 days." And so Steve says to him, "Well, just look at it allegorically. No, the Bible doesn't say the earth was created in 6 little days, basically 144 hours. You could say it was created in 6 eras, 6 ages, 6 epochs." So, okay. So he doesn't. He decides not to convert, and they end up getting eloping anyhow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they'll have offspring that are Jews and with the Gentile mother, and those combinations generally are very servitude to the Pope. They serve the Pope. These half Jews are busy serving the papacy. The Jesuits like as much of them as possible.
So anyhow, so that was just like one of the minor points. So the big thrust of the movie is when Father Steve moves back to Italy and gets involved with the diplomatic corps, and he's named the first American cardinal from the United States. Now, as I said, this is a fictionalized movie, and so it ends in 1938 with the Anschluss, basically the plebiscite where I guess Austria is annexed by Germany.
Where Hitler invades Austria and annexes Austria to Germany. That's the Anschluss of 1938. That's correct.
Okay, so that's where the movie ends. It would have been interesting if they had a sequel. So why do I bring this up? You'll never guess who the director was. Otto Preminger.
Oh, really? Otto Preminger? Wasn't he the director of the Ten Commandments?
Oh, I don't. Wasn't that Cecil B. DeMille?
Cecil B. DeMille. Yeah.
Okay, so Otto Preminger was best known as a director, although he did do some acting roles. He played Mr. Freeze in the TV series Batman, yes, and he also played the Commandant von Scherbach in the 1953 film Stalag 17. And okay, so he was born in Austria. His father, Marcus, was basically offered the position to be Attorney General for the Austro-Hungarian Empire on the condition that he converted from Judaism to Catholicism, because in order to hold any sort of public office, that was the case. If you're a Protestant, you had to become a Catholic. So Marcus declined.
Well, that was virtuous.
I'm sorry?
That was virtuous.
Okay, so anyhow, however, young Otto got his degree from University of Vienna, so he was trained by the Jesuits. And
for the listeners, Vienna is the Jesuit stronghold, one of the 2 or 3 tremendous Jesuit strongholds of Europe. Vienna. A rat line went through Vienna. Jesuits secreted out all these high Nazis through Vienna. And they've called Baltimore the Vienna of America. They've called Montreal the Vienna of Canada.
Also, wasn't one of the passageways for the rat lines Milan, Italy as well?
Oh, yes. They came through the Brenner Pass from Austria, then through the pass into Italy. And top Nazis, big ones, generals were brought through that pass by the Jesuits. And there's a book written in German called Flight Over, what is it, the Flugplatz over Germany, something like that. Well, anyway, the guy details how the top Nazis were brought out by the Jesuits. And I reference it in my book.
Well, it's interesting you should say. So if you haven't seen that film, I would recommend it. You can get it on YouTube. And so, as I said, it's fictional, but you say, what do they say? The news is fiction, and the fiction is the truth.
Well, like my grandfather used to use to get the star, He said, I found more truth in the star than I did in the Sacramento Bee. Go ahead, George.
Okay. So, something I'd like to bring. So we talked about the debate, and they're supposed to be doing it again. And So can we address something about the debate, because I forgot to cover this? In that I think it was done on purpose. So you got the impression that Donald Trump was ambushed with Kamala Harris and these 2 moderators, Muir and Davis. And I think that was done by design. So what that does is
done by design to create more sympathy for him. Remember that. The Jesuits have ordered this. The high Jesuits have ordered who's going to be the moderators. And you're going to attack Trump, and you're going to create more sympathy by attacking him. Create more sympathy among the white people. To drive us all in the new right. Go ahead, George.
Okay. Well, and so as I said, I try to do the best I can to keep up on current events. And sometimes it's hard to do because so many things are happening and I'm busy. And something that people have sent me are these profiles of U.S. cities that have changed over the last few years, say 4 or 5 years, like Portland, Oregon, like Seattle, Washington. And I brought this up before. And specifically, I'd like to spend a moment talking about San Jose, California, which is in Santa Clara County, just south of San Francisco. Now, Santa Clara County has a population roughly 2 million people, or roughly half of whom, or 1 million, live in San Jose, which is the seat of Santa Clara County and is the largest municipality. Sorry for boring people with all those extraneous details.
That's important, George. Don't apologize. It's fine. Just keep going.
Well, thank you. Well, I do appreciate that. And I imagine if I were listening to this would be a little bit tedious. So there's people who like going around filming downtowns of certain cities, like San Jose, California. And basically, downtown San Jose is dead economically, financially. There are virtually no businesses there. Restaurants, bars, cafes, nightclubs, jewelry shops.
People left. All the white people left. That's why.
So, yes, almost all the businesses are vacant. They're boarded up. They're involved with graffiti, trash, human waste.
The graffiti that the savage blacks are spray painting everywhere, and the Mexican invaders, and yeah, that's right. That these low-cultured savages have done to the city that was once a very prosperous and high white cultured city. Can't have that.
Okay, and even low-end retail places like Walgreens and Rite Aid, places like that, Pete's, Starbucks, your fast food restaurants, they're pulling out.
Of course, they can't stay there because the savages are going in there and they're stealing all their products. So when you have your products stolen from you, you can't sell them and make a profit, so you have to leave. And that's what the savages are doing in every major city. Okay, that's what they are. I'm calling them savages. That's what they are. There's nothing civil about them. All they understand is a whip. And that's why Papa Doc Duvalier was able to govern Haiti, because he had his Tonton Macoots, and any of that black savagery started taking place, the Tonton Macoots would step outside of a door, pull their gun, blow them away, and the people could get back to doing what they were doing. And that's how Papa Doc Duvalier ruled Haiti, and that's why Haiti was peaceable. That's why white women could walk down the street of Port-au-Prince, and they weren't going to get their purses taken from them. That's black government, because that's the only kind of government that is appropriate for them to keep them down and keep them from committing crime. Not a republic.
Okay, having their purses stolen would be the least of the problems.
Yeah, but I'm saying I know a lady that lived there. I know a couple that lived there, and she told me that when the Tonton Macoots were there, nothing was happening like that. So this tells us in history that blacks can only be governed by military dictators and tribal chiefs with absolute power. They can't be governed in a republic. They can't be. That's completely insufficient for them. They'll be wild. They'll be doing exactly what they are now doing.
Well, that's. Well, 20 years ago, I would have been ashamed to agree with you. I said, well, that's racist, that's bigoted, and, that's unenlightened. You can't
remember, George, I'm talking about the majority savage blacks. I'm not talking about the minority civil blacks. The vast majority of which are Christian people. They work hard every day, and they don't want to be around savage blacks either. That's why they move into white neighborhoods when they get some money. Got to move away from the savagery. I met a lady, if I can just deviate, I met a lady when I was coming back from, I think, where was it? Germany or something several years ago, and she was black. She had two big black sons, and I'd say they were 18, 20, something like that. And we were on the airplane together. And she told me I left Chicago because I didn't want my sons to be destroyed with all the gangland crime that was being committed there. So I moved to Germany, and I taught dance and I taught voice. And that's how I raised my two sons. So she moved to a white nation where she could have some culture and raise her sons so they would be gentlemen rather than raise them in savage Chicago. And that's what a black lady told me. Yep.
Well, yeah. However, the more, how should I say this? Growing up out of ignorance, I thought the civil rights movement was a wonderful thing. That America became better for blacks got the right to vote and they're enfranchised and they could sit anywhere they wanted on the bus.
Yeah. They have the right to vote for whoever the white power structure says they can vote for. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. And so however, and yes, I did officially repent of that, years ago. And I was saying, can I name any positive aspects of the civil rights movement? Is America better off for it? Or white Americans better off? Or black Americans better off?
Yeah. What do you think, George?
Well, well,
neither are better off. There's more problems between the races today than there ever has been. Of course, the whites have been beaten down. They look like they're in poverty. They're really just despicable. And we have black supremacy here that's been imposed upon us by the government. So you got blacks in power. Whenever they get in power, they always oppress the whites. So the Jesuits have got what they want to then justify where they want to go. And that's the new right.
Okay, and can I just mention something? I normally do this earlier in the stream, but forgive me for being a little tardy here. You know how several months ago I started doing this series of senior U.S. officers who were killed in World War II, right. And the list is there are probably over 50 names on the list. When I say senior, you're talking 05, 06, like Brigadier General, so and beyond. And there's one I mentioned a couple weeks ago, but since you didn't upload the video, do you mind if I bring his name up again?
Oh, go ahead, George. Just do what you're going to do. Bring it up, talk about him. I'll comment.
Okay, so I'd asked you if you'd ever heard of Major General Edwin Davies Patrick, who lived from the 11th of January 1894, died on March the 15th, 1945. That date was March the 15th, 1945. And he actually was killed in the Philippines. I guess they say allegedly a friendly fire. Well, I suppose that could have happened.
Yeah, it could have happened. And I'll comment since you dropped your voice and stopped talking. Oh, okay. I will go ahead and comment. That's what I'm supposed to do then when you drop your voice and stop talking, right?
Okay? I'm sorry.
So that's what I'll do. So you just let me know when I can make a comment, because when you go silent like that, then I don't know if you're going to talk again or if it's my turn. So every time you drop your voice and go silent, I'm going to start talking. Okay?
Would you comment?
So I don't know. It could have been an assassination. That's what they're doing with the OSS. OSS was assassinating officers that wanted to win. And like I told you, I know a guy that killed 18 American officers. He was SOG, Special Operations Group. They do it all the time. And they were doing it in World War II. So I would just conclude he was assassinated and let it go. Because when you have criminals like Wild Bill Donovan and FDR in office and Joe Kennedy, you're going to have that kind of thing.
Okay, so something I would like to say, I know I brought up several names, like 8 or 10 so far. And why is it that they basically have been disappeared from history? Occasionally they might get some acknowledgement, such as they'll name a base after them or something like that, but that's about it. It's as if they never existed otherwise.
That's right. Well, they don't want the young Americans to know true history. Why, they might get patriotic. They might get nationalistic. They might want to have a country with boundaries and borders and law and and professions and sciences that will enhance their nation. And we can't have that. So we got to bastardize them, and we have to destroy their history. And when you destroy a history of a people, they are no longer a people. And that's what they've done here. That's why they tore down all the Southern generals and all the Southern statutes and things in the North here, because they had slaves. Yes, by the way, as I said, the Bible does not condemn the institution of slavery, but the communists would say they had slaves, and so we're going to tear down all their monuments. But that's the excuse to deprive us of our history and destroy us as a people. And that's what the Jesuits want.
Okay.
Go ahead, George.
Now, do you mind if I respond?
Yeah, well, please. I've dropped my voice, and you go ahead and take over. That's how we do it.
Okay. This is a tennis match, I suppose.
That's right.
Okay. Well, I've said this before, and forgive me for repeating myself, but statues and monuments, memorials, things like that, that's part of your history. That's part of your past. Such as when little children see these things, they may wonder, well, who was he? You know, if you see a statue of Stonewall Jackson, for example, you may never have heard of him. You know, he had a nice beard. Gee, so why do they erect a statue for him? What significance does he have in our history? So back in the day, in the pre-internet era, you might go to your library and go to your encyclopedia set and go look him up. Nowadays, you can just pull out your phone. Oh, okay, I see why they put up a statue of him. However, if you remove the statue, little children won't have that opportunity. And I say children, and this applies to adults as well.
That's correct. They'll never ask the question, what about this guy? Got to remove the statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest down in Memphis now, and those communist blacks running Memphis, got to get rid of him, who was a friend of blacks. He wasn't responsible for the killing of the blacks at Fort Pillow, because those blacks were soldiers anyway. And so we got to demonize Nathan Bedford Forrest, because he was one of only a few real Southern generals that wanted to win the war. So we got to remove every memory of him, remove every memory of Jackson, and so it's so that we can remove every memory of Richard Taylor, the great Confederate generals that really wanted to win, and we'll just bastardize the history and destroy the South by destroying its history.
And, you know, something.
One more thing. And the white Southern men have become so dumb and so stupid that they don't even know their own history, and they don't even contend for it. They actually think the Confederate flag had something to do with the Ku Klux Klan. It's terrible. So they're lazy, and they're on fentanyl, or they're doing some other drug. And so when they should be in a library, or some preacher ought to be teaching them in Sunday school about the real history of the South. Because that takes work and effort and investigation. And we don't want to do that, because life's supposed to be a vacation, right? Wrong. Go ahead, George.
Well, and you want to, of course, you know, you're occupied, you know, who's going to win the ball game this weekend, or who's going to win the auto race, or whatever.
Yeah. So that's why Southern patriots should shut down NASCAR, shut down all the football games. We're not doing that anymore. We want to preserve our race, our language, our culture. And that goes for the blacks down there, too. The blacks who are in the know don't want to see that culture destroyed. It was the highest culture they ever lived in. So, but oh no, we gotta continue to preoccupy them like they're children, like the Guarani Indians were children on the Paraguayan reductions. We'll occupy them with games and dances and sports, so that while we're ruling them as their masters, they won't even suspect it. And that's exactly what they've done to the people, particularly the white people of the South.
Well, I realize, you know, technically speaking, Indiana is not in the South, but somebody told me this recently that I guess in May they had the Indianapolis 500. Well, do you know how many cars participate in that?
No.
33.
Oh, that's nice. Well, that tells me that the Masonic lodges were in the Indianapolis 500, and they chose a royal number of 33.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, and I've said this before. One of the limited hangouts is so-called truthers. He's the British fellow with the hair. Russell Brand. He has several tattoos, and one of which is a 33 on his arm.
Yeah, and who else has one of those? You know who else has one? Shaquille O'Neal. A big black basketball player. There's pictures of him everywhere in Staples. You think Staples is for Shaquille O'Neal. and only for black people to go in there. There's no white pictures in there. So he's got 33rd degree on his arm or hand or wherever. That's his craft, he said.
Um, and I just want to say for the record, I mean, I don't want to. Okay, I'm not a big fan of tattoos, and I know we've talked about that subject before. So if you got that prior to your conversion, you know, that's what
That's
it's
different. That's different. Prior to being saved, it's different. But no, tattoos are help to destroy your immune system, weaken your immune system. You got all that ink inside you. The body's trying to resist it and throw it out. It's terrible.
Well, and something I've discussed with you before is prior to 1990, you almost never saw a female with ink.
Yeah.
You occasionally see the so-called biker chick with somebody with one, but 35 years ago, it was just not considered. Even if you're unsaved, there was just wasn't considered ladylike.
That's right.
But now all the rules have been thrown out the window.
Yeah, well, that's because there aren't any ladies anymore. All these white women, for the most part, are not ladies. They are feminists, and they hate men, and they're challenging men on everything they say. And so you have the fight in the marriage, the fight among culture. And so you don't have very many ladies anymore.
And so, and well, I know, I thought we put the whole subject of the debate to bed. So, okay, and if I could just bring up one more point regarding that. Isn't it
just hold to our topic, okay? We'll go to debate and then we'll go to something else, okay? So finish the debate and then we're going to go to our next topic, okay?
Well, yes. Well, I know. I just want to bring up something regarding the debate again. You have a woman. Well, I think she's a woman, Kamala Harris, who was the Democrat nominee for president. Isn't that a rebuke of the United States?
Well, it's a disgrace. And but the Democratic Party is a communist party. What can any good thing come out of the Democratic Party? They're all communists. They're all race mixers, miscegenators, pro-black, anti-white, pro-Jew. You got the Jews leading the way with David Axelrod and some of the others. For the Pope, the Democratic Party is the Communist Party, and even I think it was Gus Hall, who used to run on the Democrat on the presidential ticket as a communist. He said, "I'm not running anymore as a communist. The Democratic Party has everything we want." So they're all a bunch of commies. And if you want to get an education on communism, just read the Black Book of Communism. 4 separate authors, the Black Book of Communism. And it shows that communism killed approximately 175 million people in the 20th century. If that should influence you one way or another, whether or not you can be a commie. Go ahead, George.
Well, yes, indeed. And, okay, I'm trying to formulate my response in a somewhat cogent manner. So, indeed. Now, that's changed because I know that in the post-World War II era, you had a schism in the Democratic Party. You had the Northern Democrats and you had the Southern Democrats, the Dixiecrats, who I'd imagine through Freemasonry were much more conservative than their Northern brethren.
Of course. And that division started with the war between the states. You had the Northern Democrats and the Southern Democrats. Yeah, but I guess it got worse during World War II. But you divided up the Democratic Party. Well, they made sure the Democratic Party was divided to make sure the election or the candidate election went to Republicans. There's a whole big. I covered that in my book.
Yes, maybe I should read it again. It's been a while since I read Vatican Assassins. So it's one of those works you probably should read every few years because you pick up some subtle nuance. And okay, so now you're talking about the Democratic Party of today, basically of last 40, 50 years. And it's interesting that historically Democrats have been Baptist, particularly for the most part, heavily Baptist and particularly Southern Baptist. And
they used to be. But as of in the 1960s, there was a big change. They were going Republican. because they realized the Democratic Party was not the states' rights limited government party. And so they switched over to being Republican. That's why all of the South, for the most part, is Republican.
And so, yeah, so recently I was watching a video from, I guess, 2021. I don't have the date. It's a discussion between a black columnist for the New York Times, Charles Blow. Yes, that's his name. Who's 54 years old. I guess he was born August the 11th, 1970. And he was talking to a race studies professor at University of Pennsylvania, Athena Butler, about the history of racism and white supremacy in the Southern Baptist Convention.
Well, they founded it. Whites founded it. Why can't they have supremacy in something they founded? Why not? If whites founded this country, why can't you have white supremacy in a country that they founded? The blacks ought to be thankful that they live here. The blacks ought to be thankful they were able to go to a Southern Baptist church where they did preach the gospel, and they had one of the greatest professions of the doctrine of separation of any church. It was written by John Brodus. So if the white men of the South founded the Southern Baptist Church, why can't they have a white supremacy? It's their church. The blacks the blacks had their own churches. Did you know that? And they were Baptist churches. When I was stationed in New Mexico, I had a good black friend when I was there. His name was Ed Wood. And I took him to church, and of course, it was all white people in the church. And the pastor came up to me and he said, "Hey, Eric," he said, "Ed can come. There's no problem with him coming here. But a black pastor on the other side of Clovis, there in New Mexico, said, if any black men come to your church, would you please send them over here because we need them?" So there's black churches for black people, white churches for white people. I got right in town here, a bunch of these Hispanics moved in. I don't know if they moved in, but they have their own little Hispanic church. It's all in the Spanish. That doesn't offend me at all. It's their race, their language, their culture, and they have founded a church here in Newmanstown, this Spanish-speaking Bible-reading church. Am I supposed to be offended about that? That's their culture. That's their church. And so if you have a church that's a white church founded by white people, why can't we have a white dominance in the church? And why should anybody be offended? And if you're offended, you can go to your own church. Go to your own black church. Go to your own Hispanic church. It's all about beating down the white man. That's all it's about. Go ahead, George.
Okay, so if I could respond to that. So
sure.
Charles Blow does this interview with this professor, Athena Butler, who is a professor of racial studies at University of Pennsylvania. Well, first, I didn't know there is such a department. It must be a relatively new thing. I probably came about
all racial studies, just like race relations in the Air Force. Race relations, when I first went to race relations in the Air Force, it's all about black supremacy. It's all about the terrible white man and all he ever did to the blacks. And so they want to brainwash you to be sorry for being white so you can kiss up to the black man and give him his supremacy. That's why they do it. That's why they do it in these universities, because they're not teaching one positive thing about what the white man has done for the black man in North America. Not one positive thing. And if they do, they'll be called Uncle Toms and Oreo cookies. You got to toe the communist line, man. You got to hate the white man. We'll have race studies that beat down the white man and raise the black man up. And so all the white girls can go out and fornicate with the black boys. That's what it's about.
Okay, so, well, thank you for bringing up that point, because we're talking about this Lindsay Davis, who's one of the moderators in the debate the other night. Well, Charles Blow got his undergraduate degree from Grambling State College, which is, I believe, in Georgia, where he's a member of Kappa Alpha Psi.
My first question is, these blacks that go to these universities, did they pay for it like I had to pay for mine? Or did they get a grant from the government so that they could give an easy education where they don't have to pay for anything, so that they can be placed in places of supremacy over whites? See, that's the first question I ask. Where'd you get your money to go to college, Mr. Black Man, Mr. Black Woman? Where'd you get it? Did your parents pay for it, or did this government give it to you? But they're not giving money to the white people. They give money to the blacks and the others. Go ahead.
Well, indeed. So this Charles Blow and like this girl or this woman, Lindsay Davis, they're both Boule. So they're
Charles Blow and Lindsay Davis, Boule. Please tell the listeners what Boule is, and we can be thankful to that one black speaker. What was his name? That showed that Martin Lucifer King was Boule. Steve Coakley. Now, Steve Coakley, he hated white people, but it doesn't mean he couldn't say something that was truthful. And he got all over King about being Boule. And that's where I first learned of the Black Boule Society from Steve Coakley. And you can watch some of his videos. He's dead now.
And I wonder if he had some help. But
I'm sure he did. When he said that the shooting of King was a conspiracy and that Jesse Jackson was involved in it, that's what Coakley said. Because Jackson's not wearing a tie. He's got a sweater on to make sure the shooter doesn't shoot him. So they're completely involved. And if you become disobedient, like King became disobedient because he opposed Francis Cardinal Spellman's Vietnam War, well, we're going to get rid of him too.
Okay. So the Boule basically is black elites who go to colleges and were part of Greek societies, sororities for females and fraternities for men. And they're plugged into the machine, and they can have a certain level of prominence in the media.
They're run by the Pope's white power structure. And they're Masons, Boule, whatever. And as long as they're good Tobies doing what the white power structure tells them to do on behalf of the Pope, they'll be just fine. That's W.E.B. Du Bois and a host of others.
Okay, so we're talking about Charles Blow, who was interviewing this professor at University of Pennsylvania, Thea Butler. Now, Butler is a black woman. She's about 64 years old. She grew up Catholic, and she said she tried her hand at being an evangelical for a few years, but it just wasn't for her. So she switched back to the Catholic Church.
Of course, because she realized who has the money and the power. And that's all she wants is money and power. So
now, prior to joining the faculty at University of Pennsylvania, she was a professor at Loyola Marymount, Los Angeles.
Goody. So she's a little sheep-dipped Jesuitess, going to promote the doctrines of the Jesuits, the social engineering doctrines of the Jesuits in Penn State. That's great.
Yes, so she came out with a book back in 2021, which was the impetus for this interview with Charles Blow. And the book was called White Evangelical Racism, Politics of Morality in America.
Yeah, so, why doesn't she write a book, White Catholic Racism? Why not that book?
Well, I suppose that'll be her next project.
Yeah, I'm sure. Go ahead.
Well, so in this interview, she said, she talked specifically about the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, or slowly becoming Catholic. And she said, since its very inception in 1845, so almost 180 years ago, it has been steeped in racism. One of the major issues for them was whether evangelists could own slaves. And I know we've discussed this before. Now, in all fairness to the SBC.
Oh, by the way, just for the listener, the Southern Baptists allowed blacks to go to their churches. And then there were black Southern Baptist churches. There was a very famous black preacher that was a Southern Baptist. What was his name? I can't remember right now. It'll come to me. And he was hosted in many white Southern Baptist churches to preach. It's a black Southern Baptist preacher. Is that racism and prejudice when you allow a black preacher to preach in your church? They did that, and they did it in the 50s and the 60s. What was his name? It'll come to me. But they have to slam the Baptists and slam them down, and they're white, so we can all walk around with our tails between our legs. That's why we need some hot preaching against that lie.
Okay, so she talked about the antebellum South, i.e. the pre-war South. Now, in all fairness, slavery was a contentious issue in all of Christendom in the United States. That's how the Southern Methodists came about, which is why Southern Methodist University was founded. That's how the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church came about, and so forth. So it wasn't just an exclusively Baptist problem.
Yeah, but the ones that made it an issue were in the North. The North started all that with their anti-slavery agitation. And it's very clear in the Bible that slavery is not condemned. There's nothing wrong with slavery. It's how you treat your slaves, to which you have title to their labor, but you don't have title to their souls. And so they have a right to a man's labor without paying him. It's just, how are you going to treat that slave? There's nothing in the Bible condemning the institution of slavery. If it wasn't for the slave Eliezer to Abraham, Isaac would never got a wife. So it's all a bunch of communist doctrine in condemning the institution of slavery. And furthermore, we were busy gradually emancipating the freed slaves back to Liberia, which white men purchased from the black tribal chiefs for the blacks of America to repatriate back to Africa, with the idea that they would build a Protestant Bible-reading empire in Africa. And that's from a book I have called The Hand of God in History by Hollis Reed. He tells you the whole purpose of why they were training the blacks and so on, so they could go back to Africa and build a huge nation, an empire, reading the Bible. That's Hollis Reed's The Hand of God in History, written in 1856, for which I'm thankful that Brother Ed Canfield got that for me. We got to rebuke all this propaganda, man.
Well, amen. Well, Butler goes on to say, but this wasn't just an issue in the pre-war South. This continued in the war between the states and long after. The Southern Baptist Convention officially opposed the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s.
Sure, absolutely.
They opposed integration and desegregation.
That's right.
According to Butler, under the canard, well, it was nothing but a bunch of communist agitation.
That's right. It was a communist agitation. The Bible teaches racial separation. The Bible does not teach integration. The Bible does not teach race mixing. God created the races to keep mankind separate. And anybody who advocates race mixing and miscegenation is busy serving the devil and rejecting Genesis 9 and Genesis 10 and the creation of the nations, which the Lord Jesus Christ in his millennial kingdom will have the races intact, and they'll have their own nations and their own borders. He's not going to race mix and miscegenate all the different races for the millennial kingdom. We see that in Isaiah 2 and other places. So no, we live under a complete and total propaganda of all these major universities. And it's time that some white academics started to speak up and have some guts.
Well, I mentioned this to you before. There's a TV network in Germany called DV. I believe that stands for Deutsche Welle Cologne. And it is probably just as bad as, say, the BBC or CNN or anything, because almost they've used. I've seen a number of documentaries from DV, and it seems that the people run it hate their fellow Germans.
Of course, it's constant beating down of the German people. I had a student, he left Germany. He said, Eric, he says, Germany has no future. He says that when the children start going to school, the first thing they do is start beating them down and tell them about Hitler and the Holocaust. I'm not denying it, but why? Why not teach them reading and writing and their beautiful German history of what Mozart and Bach and Beethoven and the wonderful Second German Reich that was Protestant? And why not teach them the wonderful, beautiful history of Germany, rather than when that Austrian took over on behalf of the Pope and ruined the place and persecuted the Jews along with the Russian communists and FDR and Winston Churchill, because they all worked together in the Eurasian Jewish Holocaust. You can't do that. You got to keep beating down the white German people, the most advanced, the most intelligent of the white races on the continent. You got to keep them down so they will never expel the Jesuits like they expelled the Jesuits in 1873. No, can't have that anymore.
Okay.
If I was a German, I'd be very vocal about it. Very vocal.
Okay, I think I may have shared this before, but according to the documentaries I've seen from DV about the history of race and race relations in Germany, the impression you get is not very good. That the Germans, in addition to being responsible for the Holocaust, according to DV, they're also, all Germans are intrinsically racist, bigoted, neo-Nazis, neo-Confederates.
Just like the white Southern men. All white Southern men are racist, bigots, and Nazis. It's the canard that they must paint all of them with, so that they never rise to a place of prominence and influence to challenge the power of the Jesuit order. Because that's what the Germans did. That's what the white Southerners did.
Okay, forgive me for stating the obvious, that in Germany, there's a reason why they call Germany, because it's the land of the Germans. There's a reason why they call Sweden, because it's the land of the Swedes. Scotland, and so on and so forth. And forgive me for stating the obvious, but therefore, when you go to those places, you expect to see Germans, Swedes, Scots, Finns, Poles, or whatever.
Whenever you go to those white nations, let's be more specific. Whenever you go to those white nations, you're looking to see white people who have a white nation, who speak a white language with a white history and a white culture. That's what you're expecting. But oh no, the Jesuits don't want that, because that's historic white Protestant nations. And we got to flood them with these savage blacks and these savage Muslims so they can do their dirty work and destroy the place. And the white power structure that brought him in there, which includes what the King of Sweden and these other centers, they all ought to be hung because they're traitors and they're destroying their own people, acting against God and destroying their own nations that God has established by forcefully miscegenating and race mixing them to destroy them so that they can't resist the papacy anymore, because the only race that resists the papacy are the white raced peoples. That is a fact. The Japanese did it for a while, and Ethiopians did it for a while, but generally only the white peoples have resisted the Jesuit power.
Okay, if you're talking about a place specifically like Germany, in addition to the problem of miscegenation, you do still have white couples. They, for the most part, are not having children. They're having one, maybe two at most.
And why is that, George? Why is that?
Well, there's a myriad of reasons. They're basically penalized.
No, I'm going to tell you the reason. I had a Dutch lady contact me once on email, and she said, Eric, she said, it's horrible here in the Netherlands. This was about 10 years ago. She said, they bring in all these blacks in here and all these Muslims, and the government gives them money. Meanwhile, we have to work hard to have one or two children. We can barely get by, but they give money to all these alien people of color coming in to destroy the place. It's financial. That's why they're not having any children.
And so when you do, and something we have discussed before, and forgive me for repeating myself, the couples need to have a minimum of 3 offsprings. That's because it has to do with something called population replacement rate. So, well, actually, the abstract number is 2.1, and I say that's abstract because it doesn't exist in reality. So, in other words, couples need to have a minimum of 3 children to replace themselves. Now, if they want to adopt beyond that, that's wonderful. However, if statistically you're having less than 2 children per couple, that's going to destroy your country. You're going to have a massive, you're not going to have Social Security or whatever the equivalent is in other countries. You're not going to be able to take care of your elderly. You're not going to.
That's right. That's why they have financially broken the white nations. England is busted. So is Scotland, so is America, so is Canada. We all have central banks, paper currencies, have credit created by the central banks, run by the Pope. And so therefore, there's no way we can prosper. There's no way we can amass a fortune. There's no way we can amass wealth to hand to our children. They've destroyed us. And you couple that with the feminism, where these women don't want to have children, they want to have their careers. Between those two things alone, that has destroyed the reproduction of whites in the historic white Protestant nations.
Well, amen. Well, something we, as I said, I got my undergrad degree from California State University, Sonoma State. But I spent a year at California State University, Sacramento. And when I was at Sac State, I took a Russian history course. And here I go again with one of my shaggy dog stories. So the professor, how should I say this? His name was Aaron Cohen. Try not to hold that against him. Now,
Well, a better way to say that, George, what better way to say that is this. The professor's name was Aaron Cohen. He was obviously a Jew, and he was also a socialist. Now, that's the better way to say it. Don't get apologetic for the names or what their races are. That's what they are. We deal in facts. So go ahead.
Okay, well, I don't know what his politics were, but I mean, his wife was German, but so that was a strange. Well, his wife was born in what used to be East Germany, but so he spoke fluent Russian, fluent German, a very, very bright fellow. As you,
I have some
but
background noise. George, I have background noise, people talking in the background.
okay,
So do we need to
one
end
second.
this broadcast today?
Well, 1 second. Could you just give me what 1 second?
Sure.
All right. Sorry. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Hello.
I'm still here, George.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I had to deal with a neighbor. So anyhow, I had this professor at Sac State, and we did. I took a course on the history of Russia in the 20th century, and it was a fascinating course. And as I said, this is long before I heard of you, Vatican assassins, and was into all this so-called conspiracy stuff. And we talked about one day we were talking about the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution. So just for clarification, in 1917, there were two revolutions. There was a spring one, and then there was the autumn. Now most people know about the second one that took place November 1917, and I said it has to do with there's a confusion about the dates because of the switch over between the calendars. And so, according to Professor Cohen,
remember, Russia under the Bolsheviks changed from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar, the Jesuit Gregorian calendar, which further proves the Bolshevik Revolution was run by the Jesuits and not the Jews, by mere calendar change. Go ahead, George. We're going to have a few more minutes here, like another 5 minutes or so. So I'd like to wind this up because it's been about an hour and 15 minutes. So go ahead.
Okay. So something I just like to say is, so according to this professor, the Bolsheviks made a number of changes in the Russian society. One, in addition to the calendar change, he said they changed their divorce laws. Now, in Tsarist Russia, under the Romanov, divorce was legal, but it was rare. It almost never happened. And only the husband could initiate the divorce.
Yeah.
So the divorce rate was like maybe about 1%. So it almost never happened. And it had to be forbidden.
That's biblical. Women do not institute a divorce under biblical matters. Only the men do. So that's what affected the Russians to do the same thing, because they had the Byzantine text, which was the true Greek text for their Russian Orthodox Church. But go ahead.
Okay, so they legalized abortion. They basically wanted to create a completely egalitarian society where women and men were basically interchangeable.
Just like here, right? Yeah.
So as I said, they liberalized the divorce laws, where they introduced essentially no-fault divorce. People can get divorced for any reason because it's a Tuesday, because, well, I have a toothache, whatever. And also, women for the first time went to university en masse. Yes, there have been a few here and there, but basically, they wanted women to go to universities, become doctors, lawyers, engineers, whatever. So they want to take them out of the home.
Yep.
And the size of the Russian family shrunk.
Yes.
And they also want to get them off the farms and into the cities, Moscow, St. Petersburg, Leningrad, Gorky, those places. They wanted to eliminate the farms and have the state take them over.
Just like here in the New Deal under FDR. That's exactly what they did here.
Well, it's interesting. I mentioned the concept of no-fault divorce. That didn't really happen until the United States until 1970 in California under Ronald Reagan. Now, there again, divorce was legal prior to 1970 in California, but there again, it was relatively rare. For the most part, the only people who got divorced were those people living in Hollywood.
Right. When I grew up in the 60s, I was born in 53, and as I grew up in the late 50s, early 60s, I only had one friend whose parents had been divorced and remarried. On the whole block that we lived in that Irish Catholic area, there was only one friend. Everybody else they all stayed married. No one was divorced.
And as I said, that happened under Ronald Reagan. And then soon, almost all the other, within probably by 1980, almost all the other states had adopted essentially no-fault divorce. Yep. And so, but they used Russia as a testing ground for what they're planning on rolling out in other places.
Sure.
And in the United States, they use California as a proving ground for what they're planning on rolling out in other states.
That's right. Between California and New York. Yep.
Well, I mean, abortion, as I said, became legal in California in 1967. There again, under Ronald Reagan. This is 6 years before Roe versus Wade.
Yeah. And by the way, there's a book called The Counterfeit Candidate. The Truth About Ronald Reagan. It was put out by the Birch Society. Very, very good book. And they list that as one of the things that he did. Also, gun control. Reagan was behind that. But go ahead.
Well, he was behind gun control as governor and later as president.
Yeah. He's a counterfeit candidate. Okay. We got about another 5 minutes, George, and then we're going to close this up. So if you want to just have a couple high points and then give your contact info, that'll be good.
Okay. Well, how about a low point? I actually I was going to bring up a school, but I guess I'll have to save that for the next time.
Yeah, we'll do it next time. Yeah.
But something I wanted to mention is I like watching this video series called Voices of Veterans. Those who served in mostly World War II, but later on in Korea, Vietnam, and so forth. And they talk about their stories. Said, "Hi, I'm Fred Jones, and I was a gunner, and I was in such unit." Well, I saw one recently with a fellow by the name of Don Graves, who just died like a year or two ago. He was almost 100, and he said right after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor on December the 7th, 1941, he heard about it the next day in this paper, and he wanted to go join the Marines. Well, it turns out he couldn't do so because he was only 16 at the time. And he went to the recruiter and he said, "I'm sorry, son, come back when you turn 17 in about 6 months, and we'll talk then." So when he turned 17, his parents signed his paper because he had to get a waiver, and he joined the Marines and he got trained to become a flamethrower. And they gave him a massive bonus. It was like $500, which was an insane amount of money at the time as a bonus, because bonuses just weren't really that high. Well, he found out why it was. They said, "Well, you probably could use it to pay for your funeral and your burial." They said, "Oh, really? What?" I mean, it varied from unit, but the mortality rate for flamethrowers was like...
What do you call them? Flanzors? What's a flanzor?
I'm sorry, flamethrower.
Oh, a flamethrower. Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. I must have had a flame. They walk around with those tanks.
I know what a flamethrower is. Very good, George. I just need a proper pronunciation so I was understanding what you said.
Okay, flamethrower.
Flamethrower, that's right.
Okay, so he was in the Marines, I guess, for 3 years, and he was actually at Iwo Jima back in February of 1945, February through April of 1945. And in his unit, his company, or whatever the size was, they had 300 men. And he was one of 18 survivors. And so that means...
The whole thing, Iwo Jima was a disgrace. A disgrace. And it was properly attacked by that one guy several years ago who went to jail. What was it? He had a whole political following after him, Lyndon LaRouche. Lyndon LaRouche said the whole island hopping design was completely wrong. They killed as many American soldiers as they could with island hopping. And Iwo Jima was another one. Tarawa was another one. Okinawa was another one. Now what you do is you sail straight for Japan and you take Japan, and then everything else falls away. But oh no, we're going to kill as many of those beautiful white Southern boys that we can, because most of the guys who went in the Army, they went into the Pacific. So anyway, George, we got to end this now. So why don't you give your contact details and then I'll close. Go ahead.
Okay, and well, if I could just close on one point, and I mentioned this to you before. So I'm sure you've seen the iconic photograph of the Marines, the servicemen raising the flag on Mount Suribachi at Iwo Jima.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we've discussed that before. So, do you mind if I just repeat? Okay, I'll repeat this. So you're talking about two different events. One that took place at 8:30 in the morning, and the second that took place at 10 o'clock in the morning. And there are 8 participants in each photograph. 2 corpsmen and 6 Marines. Corpsmen are assigned to the Marines. They're the medics. And something like 4 of the 8 participants were dead within a week. And I know I mentioned that to you before. And it was Joe Rosenthal who took the iconic photograph of the flag raising. And
right,
he was a convert.
Okay, go ahead. I got you. And they were dead within a week. And then what else happened?
So Joe Rosenthal is the one who took the photograph.
Mm-hmm.
So he was Jewish, but he was a convert to Catholicism. As a matter of fact, he got his undergrad degree from University of San Francisco.
For the Jesuits. So here's a Jew trained by the Jesuits, and he's a place of power to photograph the raising of the flag at Mount Suribachi on Iwo Jima. Okay, that sounds like good Jesuit history to me.
Oh, okay. So the whole thing, was pure Jesuit theater, but was it something like 7,000 Marines were killed at Iwo Jima?
Just terrible. Terrible. And then all those Japanese young men, too, because remember, the Jesuits were busy killing off Japanese manhood. They had a very strong manhood. And so for the Jesuits to be able to take over Japan and make it a little commercial colony and turn many of their women into whores, they had to destroy Japanese manhood. And so that was what they did. That's why they didn't sail straight for Japan. We got to kill all these young Japanese men that would go back to being patriotic Japanese men and raise families and build a nation. Can't have that. It's got to be conquered.
And of course, we've talked about the whole Godzilla franchise. How that was a creation of the Jesuits.
Sure. Yeah. All right, my George, I've enjoyed it, and we need to terminate this. So why don't you go ahead and give your contact information?
Well, I hope you're not terminating with extreme prejudice.
No, it's always without prejudice. You can always come back. In court, when a judge dismisses a case, if it's without prejudice, that means you can come back. And if he dismisses a case with prejudice, that means you can't come back. Okay, well, so I'm going to dismiss this broadcast without prejudice. So give your contact info, and then we're going to have to go.
Okay. Okay, so if people have any questions, comments, concerns, or critiques, yes, I know it's flamethrower. Please email me. Well, yeah, it's a new weapon. It's called a flamethrower. A flamethrower. Okay. Please email me at georgewidger1969@gmail.com. That's GeorgeWidger1969@gmail.com. If people would like me to go over a topic, or go over a topic again, also learn how to, probably the number one request would be how to speak properly.
You're doing fine, George. Okay, well, thanks for being with us today. You got the contact information out for the Eric John Phillips 24/7 World Radio podcast here on this September the 13th, George, 2024. Yep, Friday the 13th. Oh boy, that's a nice superstitious day. So thank you for tuning in. May the Lord lead you in what you're to do in serving him. Spend time reading in the AV 1611 Reformation English Bible in its present edition of 1769, the foundation of the American Republic, of which Andrew Jackson says, sir, that book is the bedrock upon which this republic rests. If Andrew Jackson said it, that's good enough for me. Please send your gifts to RBT, P.O. Box 306, Newmanstown, Pennsylvania 17073, or you can send it to rbpbdonate@comcast.net, rbpbdonate@comcast.net, or you can send it to my Cash App at Eric, E-R-I-C, John, J-O-N, Phelps, P-H-E-L-P-S. And I would be glad to receive those funds, and I'll use it for the ministry and for other things that I'm doing here as we further preach the gospel and expose the papacy and its design to destroy historic white Protestant Western civilization. So until the next time we meet, Maranatha, the Lord be with you.